Hello everybody, Thomas Fleming here. Well, this is a very important time of year. And it's a time that if God were going to parallel something else in our life, this might be a time for it. It's an unusual time in the form that the Jewish calendar is actually sort of in a line with our Gregorian calendar. We've got Passover starting, which is a 7-day feast. Feast of Unleavened Bread might be another name for it. That's starting on the 5th, goes to the 13th. Starts in the evening and ends on the evening, remember. And in the middle of it on the 9th, we have Easter. Passover is important. It saved the Israelites. Our passing over also were saved by Jesus. Remember, the cross has a dual meaning. It's a sign of death and sacrifice. But without the resurrection, the cross itself is meaningless. So it's not a symbol of death, it's a symbol of resurrection. People that wear a cross around their neck wear it to remember the fact that Jesus died to save our sins, save us from our sins, to reconnect us to God, and to guarantee us eternal life. That's the true meaning of the cross. And Satan has been trying to counteract it, to do anything he can. I mean, Hitler's swastika, the broken cross, is an example. And we see where there's things that Satan still does. If they have an event, and it's an anti-Christian event, they might have an upside-down cross. Keeping in mind that Peter was crucified upside down. So it's really not something new. Satan doesn't have anything new. He can only copy. Okay, so this is the Passover time of year. We're coming up on it. Actually, my moving day is on the 5th, but that would be during the day. That evening will be the start of Passover. Remember that it's 7 days in Jerusalem, but 8 days for the rest of the world. A lot of the days, a lot of the festivals are extended because it takes longer for the world to be involved. They're not really sure what time zone is to them compared to what Israel is. So some of the events are actually extended. But we're going to look at what Passover is, why it was created, what it means to us, and why it was a prophetic sign of the future. So we're going to turn to Exodus. Actually, I think what I want to do is look at Exodus 3. Let me see if I can find that. Get you up to speed. This is about Moses, of course, and his relationship with God. He lived a life like any other human being. He had a sinful nature, just like we do. And he talked to God. And he was a man of integrity. When he finally realized his heritage and went out amongst the Jews and saw what they were doing, being slaves and being beaten, he got angry. And he killed the Egyptian. Now, he hadn't had the 10 Commandments yet, but he still had that in himself. He knew that that was wrong. He could have gone back to Pharaoh and lied, saying he attacked me, whatever, but that wasn't him. That's not a man of integrity. So he knew he was in trouble, and he fled. For 40 years. Seems to be an awful long time to spend away from your homeland, but his homeland really wasn't in Egypt. His people were there, but it wasn't time yet. God sent him away to prepare him for the time. And I'm going to read in verse 3 of, or chapter 3 of verse 1 of Exodus. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. Yeah, he left Egypt and got married down there. He was also the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the desert, and he came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of the bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. I have no idea how God did that, but he did. I personally have never seen a burning bush. I wish that God would reach out in some miraculous way to me, but what I've got is sufficient. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he had turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said to him, so it was the angel of the Lord first to get his attention, but now God's in the bush. And he says to him, Moses, Moses. God cared about Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Then he said, do not draw near the place. Take the sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. He respected God. And the Lord said to him, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. You cry out to God, and he will eventually take care of it. Now, we don't know the timing of some of these events. We know he was away for a long time. He's got a wife, kids. He's living a normal life as a farmer and a herdsman. But the people are still slaving in Egypt. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in the flame of the fire in the midst of the bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with, where are we at? I got lost. Okay, I backtracked. Okay, I've surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, so I know their sorrows. So I have come down to deliver them out of the land of the Egyptians, and to bring them up from the land to a good and large land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Pizerites and the Hivites and the Jebusites and the Megabites. One of the pastors that I listen to uses that. Megabytes and gigabytes. Well, we know where all these are. Canaan, that's basically Israel. Amorites, that's Jordan. So basically, all the land that they still do not dwell in. They still don't have control of all the land. They're going to get it eventually. And before all this tribulation stuff is over, they're going to get it. Because they're going to be attacked. And every time they get attacked, they win because God's in charge. And they get the land. Remember, they were created in 48, but they didn't have Jerusalem until the 67 war, the Six-Day War. Then they got Jerusalem. And they should never have given the control of it to Jordan. They were afraid. As is typical with Israel, they see God work, and then they become afraid of the future. Anyhow, it's been the conflict all this time. Come now, therefore, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, and we can relate to this part, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? So he said, I will certainly be with you. I have got to get some reflecting devices here or bring my light. I may just have to go get my backpack and start putting all my gear in it. I hate where this keeps losing control because of the light. Okay. And this shall be a sign to you that I have sent you. When you brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain. Then Moses said to God, indeed, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me, and they shall be with me. What is his name? What shall I say? And God said to Moses, I am who I am. That's it. God is the Alpha and the Omega, the great I am. So anyhow, that's the beginning. And we know that he's going to go through and do some signs and miracles with Pharaoh, and Pharaoh's magic people are going to try to do the same thing. But God's going to let Moses do better, of course. And it basically opens the door so he can then talk to Pharaoh on a regular basis. Now, he goes and he seems to be talking fine. I don't understand this. He copped out a little bit, saying, I can't talk. You need to send somebody else to talk for me. So God appoints Aaron to do the talking. Now, our only image of Moses, frankly, is from Charlton Heston in the Ten Commandments. And he did a good job acting, but Charlton Heston didn't have any problems. And when he was riding the chariot, and he comes up to the director, and he goes, well, what am I supposed to do? Shouldn't I do this? Shouldn't I do that? And the director says to him, don't worry, I guarantee you're going to win. God's kind of like that with us when we're dealing with stuff. What about this? Shouldn't I do this? Shouldn't I do that? If God's with us, we're going to win. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, so now we're going to turn to Exodus 12, verse 1. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be your beginning of months, the month of Nisan. Their calendar is different than ours. It doesn't have the same starting point and ending point, and theirs is a lunar calendar, ours is a solar calendar. And throughout time, they have unfortunately switched a couple of times, but historians have learned where they've done the switch. That's how we can actually calculate the days properly. But if you just add them up, they don't match. We're told so many, we get the Daniel prophecy of the 70th week, or 70 weeks. You can't do that math without knowing where they adjusted the calendar, because it's going to be off for a few days. But don't worry about that. That's another story. Anyhow, this month shall be your beginning of months. That shall be the first month of the year to you. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying that on the 10th of the month, every man shall take for himself a lamb according to the house of his father, a lamb for the household. And if the household is too small for a lamb, let him and his neighbor get together. God's smart. There's no excuses. And we are to sacrifice a lamb just like they did. Jesus is our lamb. Okay? This is a beautiful picture of what we're going to get from Jesus later on. The parallels. God is so good with parallels. Too small for a lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of persons, according to each man's need, you shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, male of the first year, and you shall take it from the sheep or from the goats. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the month. So they get the lamb on the 10th. They keep it alive until the 14th of the same month. Then the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight, and they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the house, the two sides and the top. Doorposts in the middle of the house where they eat. Then they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire with unleavened bread and with bitter herbs. This is why the tradition of the Passover meal is unleavened bread and bitter herbs. Tradition. Israel is thick with tradition. And we just lost our singer just a month or two ago, the one that sang that song. If I were a rich man. Anyhow, you've seen it. Another sign of the times. We've got to be getting closer. God's going to take his singer out. Okay? You shall let none of it remain until morning, and what remains of it until morning you shall burn with a fire, and thus you shall eat it with a belt on your waist, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand, and you shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. They were getting ready to flee, so God wanted them to be ready. There was a lot of them. The Bible says, I don't know if we're going to get to it, 400,000 men. And we know the numbers never include women and children, really. So probably well over 1 million people, 1 million Jews in the land of Egypt. They got so many that the Pharaoh before looked at the number and said, these people could overpower the Egyptians. They outnumber us. We better make slaves of them. So they went from being well cared and well pampered because of Joshua to the point where they were slaves. Not what God had intended. Okay. Now the blood shall be assigned to you on the houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be on you or destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. So this day shall be to you a memorial. You shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. This is a permanent feast, commanded by God, by Moses here, and commanded by God. And we're going to look further on, and we're going to see where that's backed up. That's why they celebrate it even today. You shall keep it as a feast by an everlasting ordinance. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Basically, it's the flat bread. You know. Leaven works with the yeast and it rises. You can't have that bread. In fact, it's told not to. But God will not like it if you eat leavened bread. And this is kind of a sacrifice, a personal sacrifice. You eat the unleavened bread and the bitter herbs to remind us that we are flesh and blood, and we want to sacrifice to God because he's already sacrificing to us. Okay. On the first day there shall be a holy convocation, a get together, and on the seventh day there shall be a holy congregation to you. 7 days. But if you also put that from beginning to end, we do the same thing on a day. You start the day with God, and you end the day with God. And then you spend, in prayer. And those in beginnings can be on your knees, whereas in between, you just talk to God normally. We're supposed to spend that time with God. No manner of work shall be done on them, but that which everyone must eat, that only may be prepared for you. So you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for on this day I have brought you your armies out of the land, you and your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations. An everlasting ordinance. In the first of the month, on the 14th day of the month, at evening you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. For 7 days no leaven shall be found in your house, since whatever or whoever eats what is leavened, that same person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel. Whether he is a stranger or a native of the land, he shall eat nothing leavened. In all your dwellings you shall eat unleavened bread. I don't know if it can be any more clear than that. Then Moses called all the elders of Israel and said to them, pick out and take lambs for yourselves according to your families, and kill the Passover lamb. And you shall take a bunch of hyssop, a bush, probably similar to the burning bush, dip it in the blood that is in the basin, and strike the lintel, top, and the 2 doorposts with the blood that is in the basin. And none of you shall go out the door of his house until morning. Now, I don't know what God did. He tends to use things of this earth. I've told you before, I think that it's probably some kind of a mosquito or flea or something that was a bug carrying a deadly disease. We've known about these things before. We know the plague was carried on a bug, a flea that was on the rats. So the blood probably would have attracted the bugs They would not have, they probably would have gorged themselves, not gone in, but the houses where it wasn't, they might have gone in. By keeping the door closed, you prevented whatever this was. And God could have done something else, but like I said before, God is not a magician. He doesn't wave his magic wand, swish and flick. He doesn't do that. He plans things out. And the timing of all of his plans mesh together and make a perfect timeline. Okay. So we're talking about putting the blood on the door, and none of you shall go out. The Lord will pass through and strike the Egyptians, and when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the doorpost, the Lord will pass over the door and not allow the destroyer to come into your house to strike you. And you shall observe this thing as an ordinance for you and your sons forever. It will come to pass when you come to the land which the Lord will give you, just as he promised, that you shall keep this service. And it shall be when your children say to you, what do you mean by this service? That you shall say, it is the Passover sacrifice of the Lord, which passed over the houses of the children of Israel of Egypt, when he struck the Egyptians and delivered our households. So the people bowed their heads and worshipped, and the children of Israel went away and did so. And the Lord commanded Moses and Aaron, and so they did. So the 10th plague comes. Pharaoh's son, oldest firstborn, gets sick and dies. That breaks his spirit. He'd been hardening his heart constantly through the other 9 plagues. They were uncomfortable, but they were not something he couldn't live through. Yeah, blood in the river, frogs, locusts. He could live with all that. But the death of his firstborn, that was too much. At which point, go down to 12:31. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night. Rise, go out from among my people, both you and your children of Israel. Go out and serve the Lord, he said. Also take your flocks and your herds, as you have said, and be gone. And bless me also. I think that's interesting. We're told to bless our enemies. I wonder if he did. It didn't help, apparently, but he was asked to. And the Egyptians urged the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we shall all be dead. So the people took their dough before it was leavened, having their kneading bowls bound up in their clothes on their shoulders. Now the children of Israel had done according to the word of Moses. They had asked for the Egyptians articles of silver and gold and clothing, and the Lord had given the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they granted them what they requested. Thus they plundered the Egyptians. That turned to be a two-edged sword. They took the wealth out of Egypt, but then they burned all that stuff to make the golden calf. We have people coming in here. It's still sprinkling. It's been raining all morning. That's why I'm under the cover. You always see me under a cover when it's raining. But it's not raining enough that it makes so much noise you can't hear me. If that's happening, then I have to quit. That's why I don't record in my tent very often. If the weather's bad enough that I have to stay in my tent, it's usually too noisy. In one of the videos I just did, excuse me, the wind was blowing. I had my microphone, and I've got it now, but it's not noisy. I'm outside. I don't have a choice. Okay. So anyhow, I said, where are we? The Lord had given the people favor on the side, and they gave them all their stuff. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses and Succoth, about 600,000 men on foot, besides children. Okay, 600,000. If you double that, which is an estimate of how many people could be there, you're looking at 1.2 million. And that could even be low, because there could be more children. If you figure double, it means that each one's got a wife and then maybe 2 children. So it could have been almost 2 million if you want to go all the way up to the top. The mixed multitude went up with them also, and the flocks and the herds and a great deal of livestock. And they baked unleavened cakes of the dough that they had brought out of Egypt. For it was not leavened, because they were driven out of Egypt and could not wait. Imagine that haste. You don't even have time to let the dough rise. Yeah, that's in a hurry. Not as big of a hurry as they're going to be at the end when they got to flee Jerusalem, but that's another story. Now the sojourn of the children of Israel who lived in Egypt was 430 years. And it came to pass at the end of the 430 years, on the very same day, it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt in the night of solemn observance to the Lord for bringing them out of the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord, a solemn observance for all the children of Israel throughout their generation. So you can see, this is a big thing. When this much time is spent on an event, one, it points forward to Jesus. And two, they're to remember it forever. And there are a number of feasts throughout the year. Most of them are in the fall. We have first fruits, we have trumpets, Day of Atonement, tabernacles. Those are in the fall for the most part. This one here is at the beginning of the year. Now, notice that this is the beginning of the year. When they go and they talk about trumpets being in the beginning of the year, they lied. They changed the date so that they didn't have to have trumpets on the same time frame as when Jesus was crucified. Remember that when we study trumpets. Trumpets should be during this time. They moved it. Okay. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Consecrate to me all the firstborn, whatever opens the womb among the children of Israel, both man and beast. It is mine." So this is where he's starting to give Moses the rules, the law. He doesn't have the 10 Commandments yet because he didn't go up on the mountain yet. That's coming. They're going to get into the desert. They're going to get a chance to send their spies out to spy the new land. And all but 2 are going to say, we can't possibly do it. See what I'm saying? They watched the miracles. These people that watched the miracles turned chicken. They saw the water parting. Now again, it's not like in the 10 Commandments where you got a wall and a wall. God didn't do that. Okay, everybody, this is a 2-parter. I'm going to end the first part here with this little add-on to remind you that it is a 2-parter. Go to the next video when it comes out, and we will finish the story. It's a big story. It's something that we were commanded to back then to remember, and they will still remember today. And it is a parallel to Jesus. He was the Passover lamb. He was sacrificed without blemish, without sin. He paid the price. We're to be thankful for him doing that. We're to remember him at this time of year. And we're to love one another. If we do a communion, remember what it's about. The bread is his body. The wine is his blood. And Jesus said, I will not take this wine until I am back with you again. Remember why he died for us, and that he did, and that he had to suffer greatly for us. But he conquered it. He conquered our sin. He conquered death. There is nothing that we should be afraid of. Okay, until we meet in the clouds, God bless.